It's time to turn to the WUKY sports page with your host, Keith Elkins, revealing conversations and stories you thought you knew from prominent Kentucky sports figures. Now, here once again is Keith Elkins.
Jack Givens is with us today. He led Kentucky to the 1978 NCAA championship, scoring 41 points against Duke in the final game, earned All-American and multiple All-SEC honors while at UK. He's third on the all-time scoring list at Kentucky with 2,038 points behind only Dan Issel and Kenny Walker in men's basketball. And Jack went on to play professionally in the NBA and in Italy, Belgium, and Japan. He has had a long and successful broadcasting career and just completed his second season as the analyst for UK radio broadcasts. And he has also recently released a book about his life, They Call Me Goose, co-written with Doug Brunk. Jack, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Keith. Good to be on with you.
Let's, before we talk about your book, and I want to talk extensively about that, but we are recording here on April 15th, which means we're about 24 hours removed from really an inspiring event at Rupp Arena yesterday, the introduction of new head coach Mark Pope. You were there among many, many former Wildcats. Tell me your impressions.
Absolutely awesome. Mm-hmm. The event was, I don't know how it could have gone any better. I think it was more than the university had expected. With the way the fans showed up, the way the Big Blue Nation came together to support Mark and the new era of Kentucky basketball. I don't think there's any question that Mark wasn't the first choice in the minds of a lot of fans, but I think he might ultimately prove to be the better choice, just simply because, first and foremost, he's a Kentucky blue blood. He's played here. He understands the program. He understands the fans, and to some extent, that's a huge advantage for any coach who might coach here. So I commend Mitch and his staff for doing the due diligence that it takes to make sure you get the right person for the job.
Mm-hmm. And there were many highlights, it seemed, yesterday, both in how things were handled with the introduction of the players coming off the bus, including the 96 players that were teammates of Mark Pope. And, of course, he seemed to say all the right things. Was there anything that stood out to you, both as a former player, now a broadcaster, anything that stood out to you about his presentation yesterday?
Well, he was excellent. He was really, really good. Seasoned vet as far as how he handled that situation. A few things he talked about I was really happy to hear. Number one, and I don't want to say the folks before him who served as head coach didn't quite get it, but I just like the fact that this program is about the University of Kentucky, and he stressed that they would be playing for the name on the front as opposed to the name on the back. The thing I always thought about that is, yes, that's the way it should be. But if the name on the front has success, then the name on the back is going to be successful. And I think that's the order it should be in. And I'm glad he pointed that out. I think that's one thing that people wanted to hear. He also said winning games at the end of the year was important, and not just the NCAA tournament, but, that SEC tournament is huge for Kentucky fans also. I mean, that is something that Kentucky fans look forward to every year because it's a good way for a lot of people who don't get to come to Rupp Arena often, good way for them to get in and be able to see Kentucky play. And losing in that first round is the worst thing that could possibly happen for not just the Kentucky fans, but for Nashville and the city and the revenue growth that they have in that period of time when Kentucky fans are there. It's just huge for their economy. So, I've been down there, and I know the difference between have Kentucky through the weekend and having them lose that first game. I know the difference, and Nashville is just not the same if Kentucky is not there.
No, it's not, and he gave the fans reason to think that this is going to be a priority now to get down there and compete and win some ball games in that tournament, and start winning the tournament again.
Yeah, I think it's going to be nice.
Yeah, so a lot of excitement in Big Blue Nation right now, and you've had a very exciting spring releasing the book. They Call Me Goose. And co-written with your co-author Doug Brunk, and highly successful so far, right? I mean, I know you stayed busy, and I've heard you say on many interviews that you're surprised and pleased with the success.
I'm very, very pleased and pleasantly surprised. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, this is my first crack at writing a book. It wouldn't have happened without Doug, because Doug was very good at getting me to open up and to share things and prodding questions that forced me to think about not just what happened, but why things happened, my career, and how did you come to playing at the University of Kentucky, all kinds of things that I've talked about, but I've never really gone into, deep into the reasons why things, my life progressed as it did, So we talked about some things in the book that I'd never talked about before, didn't feel a need to talk about before. And some of the things I thought would matter least have been some of the things that the folks who have read the book want to talk about the most. So, I guess people who have that kind of background understand those nuances that make an effort like this successful. But I'm pleasantly surprised with the interest it's gotten.
It was a book that, had you just written a book titled Jack Givens, My Life in Basketball, people would, I think, be attracted to it. But as you say, you opened up in this book and had some more personal things that you chose to go into, and I think you've gotten some feedback on this, too, as far as your childhood, growing up in the Bluegrass Aspendale area, and some of the things about your childhood experience. Tell me a little bit about that, because you came from a huge family.
Yes.
Your father was not part of the family.
Right.
And your mom, of course, somebody's got to put food on the table, so she had to work a lot. So you all had to take care of each other and have some other support too, didn't you?
And she didn't just work. She worked odd jobs. She did everything she could to make sure there was enough money on coming in to feed us. And when there are 10 of you, and like I say, from a long time, my dad wasn't around. All of the responsibility of keeping the household afloat fell on her. I never heard her complain one time about how difficult it was. She never complained. She just did what she had to do to make sure she got done what needed to get done. And listen, we all pitched in. Everybody who, my older brothers and sisters who had jobs, contributed to the household. I did when I started working at 14. I was too young to start working, but I fibbed and said I was 15. I might have been 13 at the time, actually, and I fibbed and said I was old enough to work, do the dishes at Little Inn Restaurant, which was located out on Winchester Road, the best prime rib steak that you could get anywhere, from what I understand. I didn't get to enjoy it very often unless there was, unless the chef would sneak us a little piece that we could enjoy. But it was an awesome opportunity. But yeah, my childhood was wonderful. People say, "Man, you were poor," and I said, "Yeah, I was." I said, "But guess what? I didn't know it. I knew only thing I knew was what I knew." And growing up in that situation, 3-bedroom apartment, in a low income area, was a part of me and a part of my childhood. And listen, we made it work. There were times when we didn't have enough food to eat, but there was never a time we didn't have something to eat. And, I know what it's like to stand in the food line or to go to the services and get those big blocks of cheese that you bring home, and we didn't have a knife strong enough to cut it. It was so hard. I mean, it was interesting, but it was really fun reliving those days. It was really, really neat to think back when, and that is something that I've always tried my best to remember. But a lot of the really bad parts of it, if there were bad parts of it, it's all relative, but part of that was brought out in this. I mean, growing up in a neighborhood that has a big 10-foot fence with the chain link across the top of it that separated the white side of the neighborhood from the black side of the neyborhood. And the apartments on the white side of the neighborhood were a little nicer than the ones on our side. They'd open that fence up through the day and you could walk through or get to the park that we played in. But at 6 o'clock or so, they would close that gate and put the chain around it and keep the neighborhood separated. It was just a way of life. We dealt with it. We accepted it. We didn't complain about it. We made it work. And but that's interesting. People, especially young people who didn't grow up in Lexington or didn't really know the history of Lexington. A lot of young people who have read the book come up to me and say, "Man, how did you deal with this neighborhood?" And I said, "Well, we dealt with it because that's the only thing we could do. We weren't in a position where we could change anything, and having marches and that kind of stuff, we didn't do that. We just did what we had to do, and we made it work. But it was a great way to grow up, for sure."
Yeah, it sounds like there were a lot of great experiences that went along with it. As you say, kids adapt because I guess they don't adapt. They just know that that's life, and so they go from there. You had a big move in your life when you were in high school and beginning to take some steps forward as an athlete, and your family got a chance to move into a house, which also moved into a different district, meaning you were going to play for Bryan Station rather than Henry Clay.
Right,
but,
right.
That was a big move. But you said you were happy to make the move because you had a house.
Yeah, it was interesting. I grew up with James Lee, who also played basketball at Kentucky. We graduated high school together. He was at Henry Clay. I was at Bryan Station. But a lot of people don't know that I started out at at Henry Clay because we were in that district and came really, really close to James and I being on the same team through high school. And I think back on those days, and we could have had just some unbelievably successful teams. All the teams in Lexington at that time were successful, and we were very successful at Bryan Station. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's good to dream about what James and I might have been able to do together, playing for the same team. But, yeah, we moved from Henry Clay District to Bryan Station District. Interestingly enough, when we moved was the week of high school tryouts. So I tried out for the Henry Clay team on Monday and Tuesday. We moved on Wednesday into the new house, and I tried out for Bryan Station on Thursday and Friday. So realistically, I made two teams in 1 week, which was really fun. But the move was great. I mean, we had a house. Mm-hmm. We had a house, and, my mom paid, I think, $14,000 for the house. It was a four bedroom that nowadays would equate to maybe 2 bedrooms because the rooms were small. But there's just a sense of pride that came along with moving and having our own house. I mean, it was so much fun moving and the experience was good. I compared it in the book. I compared it to the Jeffersons, George and Lizzie moving into the neighborhood, moving on up. That's what the chapter in the book is entitled. And I remember George Jefferson, I watched that show, and I remembered him with that walk that was so proud to say, "Hey, man, not that we've made it, but we've made it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so that was a very, very proud moment for us. And again, my mother did it all by herself. I mean, she signed for it. She put her name on the line, and it was just a wonderful experience.
Well, you went on, of course, to a great career in high school basketball at Bryan Station, and you mentioned that era. Of course, there were a lot of games played in Memorial Coliseum during those days because there was such intense interest in the high school teams, and they were so skilled, too. They were such great teams. And, of course, you begin to get attention from colleges at that time, and it was a very interesting era because there were African-American athletes at UK that time, but not many.
Yeah.
And so you were still, I guess you could say, sort of in the pioneer stage in a way, and in a way that maybe some of your family and friends would say, are you sure you want to do that, when UK came calling, and Coach Hall was there by that time? But tell me about that experience.
Yeah, and they didn't say, what are you doing? They said, are you crazy?
Yeah.
For even thinking about going to the University of Kentucky. I mean, Reggie Warford was the real pioneer. He came in at a time when if he didn't come in, those of us who followed might not have been there. But he came in, and Larry Johnson and Marion Haskins were there. But for Lexington, growing up in Lexington and being from right here, 15 minutes from the university, it was something that just was unheard of because of all the really, really good basketball talent that came through Lexington before me. I mean, you think back to Douglas High School and Dunbar High School, and you think about some of those teams and some of those athletes they had at those schools and how good those players and those teams were. Just a few years before me, they weren't even considered to be eligible to go to the University of Kentucky. So growing up for me, I thought I would go to Kentucky State University like everybody else from my neighborhood who went to college, and not many people did. But I thought I'd be at Kentucky State. I never thought University of Kentucky was even an option. But when I got to high school and I started to travel more and more around the state of Kentucky playing games, whether it was in Lexington, whether it was the surrounding counties and teams that we played against, whether it was all the way down west to Owensboro, or whether it was East Kentucky to Hazard, everywhere we played, there were Big Blue fans in there, particularly my junior and senior year. There were Kentucky fans with blue and white and holding up signs and screaming, "We want you, we want you." And so it made me have to start thinking about the university as an option for college. And obviously I made that choice, but it wasn't as easy as you would think. My mom, for one, didn't want me going to the University of Kentucky. She grew up in that era where, don't even think about coming over here. So it was a lot of people don't realize that was a choice, a real serious choice that James and I had to make at that time. But it was something that had to happen, and I'm glad we decided to go there.
You mentioned Kentucky State, and I was at UK as a student, and just before you, 1970 to 74, and a group of friends and I went over to Frankfurt one time to watch the Kentucky State play Tennessee State. And when you mention Kentucky State, people now, and thinking of basketball, they think about the exhibition games that are played. But in those days, those guys, I mean, that was NBA talent. Those guys were great.
Oh, Travis Grant and Len Elmore, so many great players over there.
Yeah, so that was a possibility for you, but as you say, you made the difficult decision, decided to come to UK. You and James, I think, had a joint announcement, didn't you? At the time? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so Bobby Barlow had coached you in high school. Of course, Joe Hall was your college coach. And before I go on to asking you about Coach Hall, I did want to mention that you were recruited by Tennessee, and some of the college decision comes down to, hey, this is close. This is here.
Yeah. Tennessee was really on me hard. They wanted me to come there. I had never been on an airplane in high school, so going to places who also wanted me, like UCLA and UNLV and some of the other schools out west that were really wanting me to come for a visit, I had never been on an airplane, so I I just couldn't talk myself into making that kind of trip. And at that time, we could make as many visits as we wanted, so there would have been a lot of opportunity for me to do that. But what I could do, and my only means of transportation, because we didn't have a car part of that time, was the Greyhound bus. So I got on a Greyhound bus. I made every stop in every small town between here and Knoxville, and went down to Knoxville for an official visit, and had a good visit. And this was my sophomore year, going into my sophomore year. So until the time I committed to Kentucky, Tennessee was right there, because that was the only other experience I'd had at a major college.
So Kentucky State and Tennessee are among the what-ifs in Jack Givens basketball history. Of course, you came to Kentucky, and your freshmen were playing varsity basketball by the time you got there, so you were able to contribute as a freshman to a national runner-up team. I know you've told the story about learning from Kevin Greavy about what it's like to be an upperclassman and to deal with being a leader on the team, which meant Coach Hall really brought the heat, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he really did. And, for current day Kentucky teams where you have so much of the one-and-done situation that you have to deal with, maybe two and done, so much of what I learned in college playing basketball came from the guys who came before me. You mentioned Kevin Greavy. He was one. But we had Jimmy Dan, and nobody's tougher than Jimmy Dan. We had Mike Flynn, who was a tough-nosed guy who brought it every day. These are guys I went against every day in practice. Bob Guyette, and those kind of people my freshman year are the ones who were seniors who we learned from. And then I learned from Reggie, and I learned from Marion Haskins and Larry Johnson. I learned from those kind of people because they were a year before me. So much of college basketball and coaching is important. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you have to know what's going on the floor, and you have to be able to perform that as far as plays and what you want to do defensively and that kind of stuff. But the real nuances, I mean, little things that make all the difference in the world come from those seniors, those guys who have been there before. And then I got to lead young players behind me. I mean, a lot of guys came in, talked to Dwayne Casey this morning. Dwayne's one that looked to me and to James and to Larry and to Marion to teach them. Fred Cowan, LeVon Williams, all those young guys who came after us learned from us, and we helped to make their games better and their experience better. So that's what I like most about what I learned in college as far as how to play the game.
And as you said, you found yourself eventually in the leadership role. That was a national runner-up team in 1975 and NIT winners in 76. You had maybe even the best of the 4 years in 77. A lot of people think so anyway.
Yeah.
But lost to North Carolina that year in the tournament. But then came back, and in a year when you were expected to win it all, you won it all. And I know you've talked many, many times about that team, and I can't believe so many years have passed since then, but they have. And what's your first thought now when somebody asks you about that championship?
Well, about that particular championship, I think the thing that stands out to me more than anything now, looking back, is the reality of how truly difficult it is to win a national championship. I mean, we were there as freshmen, as you mentioned. I mean, we got to the final game. I thought the next year winning the NIT helped prepare us in a big way for winning a game on that level. Because NIT was huge at that time.
Big tournament, yes.
I mean, it was a big tournament. NCAA only had, 32 teams at the time? So a lot of really, really good teams didn't make the NCAA. So winning it that year kind of set us up. But you mentioned the team prior to the year we won it. That was a great team. And we didn't even get to the Final Four. We lost the game going to the Final Four. But it's just so difficult to win. You have to be lucky. Obviously, you have to be good. But you have to be lucky because injuries happen and take players out of the mix that are vital to you winning. You have to get a break every now and then, like we got in the Florida State game where we came out that first game in that year. We struggled and didn't play well in the first half. Coach Hall benched me and a couple of other guys in the starting lineup. And so you have to get a break. And then you have to perform. And performing sometimes is the easiest part of the equation, you know. But it was such a wonderful experience. And part of the experience itself is magnified by the knowledge that, man, we did something special. Mm-hmm. Because there have been a lot of teams, my freshman year, a lot of great teams that should have won and could have won but didn't. And that's the thing that stands out most to me at this part of my life.
And the individual performance in the final game, the 41 points, that's something that every kid dreams of, is to have a game like that in a championship game. But you've talked about that over the years, and that has just never worn thin. I think Kentucky fans still, the ones who were around at that time, they still love that game and your performance as much as they ever did, and continue to show you the support for what happened that night. But what do you recall about it? I mean, you've talked about the Duke not changing its defense and things like that, but I mean, just give me a summary of that game.
Well, number one, I think going into that game, I felt, and I think my whole team felt, going into the Final Four, we felt that we were the best team. We just thought we were ranked number one, and in our minds, we deserved to be number one. We were ranked number one all year. So we had a confidence going in anyway that we pulled on from our experiences before. Final Four, NIT, losing the year before, and not getting a chance with that great team to get. We were so confident that that helped propel us. As far as my individual game, I tried to approach it like I approached any other game. I mean, we had great players on that team. I think anybody on that team could have had the same kind of night I had. But if you want to write a script about how to end your college career, I think a lot of people would write it just the way it ended for me. It's great to think back on. It's a great memory for so many people. I mean, and then with YouTube and the social media now, even the young kids. I mean, even they weren't even thought of when I won the championship with Kentucky. They can go back, and it's amazing to me that young people, teenagers sometimes, come up and talk to me about that NCAA game, the final game, like they saw it. So it's a great experience. It was a fun experience. We were called the team that had no fun. The national media jumped on us, and because we were so focused on what the task at hand, which was for us, not just enjoying being at the Final Four. We've been there and done that. For us, the focus was winning it, and that's what we did. I mean, that was our approach, but we approached it that way because we knew we couldn't allow this opportunity to slip away from us again. So it was an awesome experience, and great memories, not just for us who played on the team, but for the Big Blue Nation, because everywhere I go, people want to talk about it. They bring Sports Illustrated covers up to get them autographed. I mean, it's really been fun to live that for the many years since we won it.
We talked at the start of our conversation about the event at Rupp Arena yesterday, as we record on April 15th. it's hard to think of one that had that kind of enthusiasm and just emotion from the fans, but one that came to mind, different sort of event, was when you came back from the championship game in 1978 and went to the airport, and I guess in those days maybe there weren't quite as many preparations as there might be for an event like this, and people showed up, to say the least, at the airport, and thousands of fans there to greet you. That had to be a big part of the day too.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. I mean, we couldn't believe it. And the pilot came over the PA system on the airplane and said, "Guys, we have a big crowd at the airport waiting for you. They would like for you to come out and wave at them and say hi." And so Coach Hall got on the mic and said, "Okay, we're going to do this. We'll say hi, and then we'll get to the dorm and to the Wildcat Lodge, and it'll be done and be over with." But we walked out the airport on upstairs that kind of overlooked the lobby area. And, man, I don't know how many people were there, and I don't know how they all got in. They were on top of everything, just completely just a crazy, crazy scene, a lot like what we saw with the introduction of Mark Pope. It was just amazing, but that was a scene that I will never forget.
Well, that was the cap on your college career. You went to the NBA. You played for Hubie Brown, and so you had gone from Bobby Barlow in high school, who was a more low-key coach. Coach Hall was very intense. You said Hubie Brown was even more intense. And, of course, also at that time you get the aspect of this is a business. Right?
Yes. And, I think back on my NBA career, and it's one of those things you say, I'd like to have a mulligan and do that over, that shot over. I didn't love the NBA. I loved being at home. I loved being in Kentucky. I got into a situation with the Hawks down in Atlanta where I wasn't prepared for the competitiveness of what the NBA was. I didn't follow the NBA even through college, so it was a whole new experience for me. I don't want to say I didn't handle the situation well, but I had zero confidence that I could and should be competing with the guys that were there in the NBA. Zero confidence. And after I finished playing, I don't know for sure why I felt that way coming off a national championship and all that I had done, but it was just one of those situations that wasn't good for me. And that's why I'd like to have another shot at it, because having, even after that, spent a lot of time around the NBA and getting a whole better understanding of what playing on that level is like, I think my career would have been a lot different. I'm glad I had the chance. I'm glad I can say I'm one of the very few percentage of people who play college ball, high school ball, even smaller percentage. Glad I'm able to say I played there in the NBA and I was part of that. But I wish I could have it over because I just wasn't mature enough to really get the most out of the experience.
You did have some international experience as well. I'd like to ask the guys who have played ball internationally. I mean, you have to focus on basketball. That's the job. But at the same time, you get to see the world a little bit, too. And you played in Italy and Belgium and then had a pretty good season in Japan, as I recall. You'd mentioned in the book, I think, that one of Italy or Belgium or maybe both were not particularly good fits for you, but you seem to enjoy your time in Japan.
Yeah, I was in those other countries very short period of time. Was in Belgium for tournament time, so I joined the team right before the tournament. First time away from home, and then Italy and Belgium. I mean, those were not quite as good experiences. But then when I went to Japan, I was in a situation where I was kind of expected to be the man. I mean, they had just started allowing American players to come over. Each team could have 2 foreign players. A lot of those foreign players were from other countries. But yeah, I was in a situation where the coach of that team had come to Kentucky and spent a season, our championship year, in Lexington, learning the coach from Coach Hall. Coach Moto, Kohama is his name. And Coach Kohama said, after I finished playing, why don't you come to Japan and play there on my team? And I thought about it, and I realized it was a long way away from home, number one, but I decided to go. And when I went, it was a great experience. I mean, wonderful experience. I did get to see a lot of the world traveling around playing basketball at other places, but I might be the only person who won a national championship here in the U.S. and then won a national championship in Japan because my team we won the national championship, and to be named the most outstanding player in both countries, you know. So I was pretty big stuff in Japan, man. I didn't know it because I couldn't read everything they were saying about me, but you know, they had me on billboards and posters and in magazines and books, and you know, I was speaking here or there and everywhere I went throughout the country to play. The crowds were packed in to see me play. So it was a wonderful experience being in Japan. The people were great. The food was good. I didn't eat the sushi, the raw meat, the raw fish at that time. I didn't even think about eating that stuff. But the other food was great. And, you know, I was able to visit since then. And the excitement when I came was as great as it was when I played there. So, yeah, it was a great experience.
A lot of this is detailed in the book, They Call Me Goose, by Jack Givens and Doug Brunk. And you also go into some of the setbacks in life that you've had, and financially, legally, and some things that may have cost you big time. But you had some people that came to your aid and offered you support at very important times in your life. Was it difficult to come forward with that? Because you do detail this in the book.
Well, It probably was. Some of the stuff probably was a little bit tougher to talk about. I would just as soon not have talked about it. But the good thing is all of those experiences have helped to form who I am today. Mm-hmm. And if I just put in there all the good stuff without kind of explaining why the good stuff is good stuff. And the good stuff is not huge stuff. I mean, but it's just good stuff. And good times in my life, I wouldn't be telling the full story. Nothing in there was to a point that I wanted to hide from it. That's for sure. I mean, you know, I probably wouldn't have wanted to shared that financially I was having difficult times, and, you know, woke up one morning and my car was gone, and come to find out it was gone because I hadn't paid the bill in 3 months. That wasn't fun to talk about, kind of embarrassing to admit, because I think people who know me only as UK basketball player, All-American, winning the national championship, all of the stuff that goes along with that. A lot of people would think, man, you should have it all going on. But the fact of the matter is we all struggle with certain things. And my struggle at that time was trying to keep up with the Joneses, people who had what I wanted, who could afford to have what they had, and could afford to have the things I wanted. I didn't, and I couldn't. And but going through that helped me to understand what finances are and the importance of managing getting all of that stuff under control, it helps form who I am today. So while I didn't want to go through that, I was embarrassed to go through that and didn't want to admit it, it was good. It was good. And, a couple of other situations, being accused of something I never would have thought about doing, and having to live through that experience, getting arrested and going to trial. But it was so wonderful going through that experience. And I know you think, man, how can it be wonderful going through a time like that? Well, number one, I knew what the outcome was going to be. So that made it easy to get through, easier to get through. But number two, I found out what my family was about and how much even my siblings at that time, even though we're much older, and they still were by my side 100%, like they had been in every good and bad situation throughout my life. My mom was wonderful through that experience. And my wife was just amazing, prayed for me every day, and she and my kids were by my side every step of the way. And I talk about that, and I talk about some of the real highlights of going through that experience, which were really pretty special. And if I talk about it more, I'm going to get emotional, because those things were, that's when you find out about life. So yeah, I went through all of that. I had some great, great friends down there in Florida at the time I went through both of those situations. My men's group at my church was just amazing. What I found out, which was really good, and it's hard to see when you're going through stuff, good or bad, but especially bad stuff or tough stuff. I won't call it bad necessarily, but tougher stuff. One of the first things I learned was that I'm not the only one going through stuff. I wasn't the only one. And these guys were leaders of the little community we lived in. These guys were big-time insurance guys and big-time real estate guys and an sports agent, a couple of sports agents, and just people who you would think had everything going on. But I found out that you're not the only one who struggles, and you're not the only one going through that. So it made me feel really good through my men's group and through print and reading books and learning about situations that creep up in our lives. That it's other people go through stuff. I had a pastor who I was seeing down there, Bill, who I talked to a lot, and I can't tell you how much he helped me. One of the verses that really, really affected me was first chapter of James, verse 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind. And it goes on to talk about perseverance and the character that it builds. And he asked me one day, he said, what's the most important word in these chapters you just read? And I went through the perseverance. Yeah, that's a good word. But it's not the word I'm looking for. Character. Yeah, character's good. But that's not the word. And in my mind, I thought he was wanting me to say joy in a bad situation. Find that joy that comes with these situations. So I finally said joy. I didn't want to. I avoided it as long as he would let me. And he said, yeah, that's a good word. But still, that's not the word that I want you to focus on. And he told me, read it again. And I said, consider it pure joy when you face stop. He said, now read it again. Consider it pure joy when you stop. He said, now that's the word. It didn't say consider it joy if. It didn't say consider it joy whether good or whether. It said when. He said, we're all facing stuff. He said, what do you think? Because you played at the University of Kentucky and you're announcer for the Orlando Magic and you got all this good stuff, that word when excludes you? I said, I just broke down and started crying because that pointed out, this is just a process. God is going to be glorified through all of this. He doesn't care what you go through. He's going to shine on the other end of all of this. And once he pointed that out to me, the whole situation changed. It's like a ton was lifted off my shoulders. But I wouldn't know that if I had not gone through that situation. That might be the only reason that I went through it. But it was awesome to experience that. So even when it's tough, and you may not want to talk about it, but other people go through tough stuff too. So if I can encourage one person through this book, that go to that verse, man, and those verses, and just apply that to your life, it'd be worth doing the book, and certainly worth talking about some stuff that I may otherwise not have talked about. So, yeah, it was good. It was a good experience, no question about it.
Well, of course, there are a lot of detailed stories of your personal experiences from growing up to some of the difficulties you talked about. But, of course, there's a lot of great basketball stories in there, too. And people may not have realized when you went to work for the UK Sports Network just a few years ago that they may have not known that you were a seasoned broadcaster. You'd been with the Magic for several years, and so you were no stranger to the microphone. But now you've got a chance to reconnect with the UK fan base, and here working with Tom now, and people seem to really enjoy your work on the radio. I know I do, and that must have been a lot to you too to reconnect in that fashion.
Yeah, it's great coming back around. I mean, it's gone full circle, my broadcasting career, because I started here in Lexington, broadcasting high school games on the radio with Dick Gabriel and Ralph Hacker and Rick Shaw, some of those names from way back in the day. I mean, I started on the air with them. Rob Bromley and Bob Domney doing the UK network games, those games that we'd do the game and then come back and they replay them at 11:30 at night after the news. Those were the good old days. And now to be coming back and having the opportunity to work with Tom has been awesome because he's a real pro and he makes my job so much easier doing that. But being back in the fold, back involved in with the basketball team, and being back into the community, into the state of Kentucky. You're talking about writing and ending. I mean, that's been huge for me. One of the best things that ever happened to me was getting away from Kentucky. I got away for, 23 years living in Florida. I mean, I was with the Hawks a couple of years, so I was in Atlanta. I traveled and played overseas a lot, so I've traveled a lot. For about a 30-year period. But being away really brought home how special Kentucky is, how special home is. So to be able to go through all of that and come back around full circle and end up right where I started from has been awesome to be back involved with the program.
And we've talked a couple of times now about the introduction of Mark Pope, but I mentioned that you were part of the delegation of former players, and you've talked about connecting with that fan base. You step off the bus and you get the big cheer, and then you hear all the fans hollering Goose. And as you mentioned toward the end of the book, it's such a special relationship, and it's very much still there for you.
Well, and and the love goes both ways, because the fans, again, even the young fans who I know didn't know who I was if they didn't know my basketball career. They are amazing in the love they show me and the response they come when I'm around, and when that comes when I'm around, and if I get introduced in a situation like yesterday, they still show their love and appreciation for me, and I do the same thing back. And I love, because I get involved in stuff throughout the state. If I get called from Paducah to Pikeville, if I can do it, I try to continue to do it, help charities and all kind of stuff, because that's a small way for me to give back a little bit of what the Big Blue Nation has done for me. Again, through this book, I'm being shown that Kentucky fans are unbelievable. I mean, they have asked me to come sign books in places like down in the Fort Myers, down in Florida. They've asked me to come and sign books. I'm going to Austin, Texas, and Houston, Texas, and Dallas, Texas, for the University of Kentucky Alumni Associations there. I'm going all the way out to San Diego to the association out there. Of course, all around the state, places like Hazard and Ashland, and going to Frankfurt here soon. And Big Blue Nation extends everywhere. I said Fort Myers, Sarasota, Florida. I've got that coming up in a couple of weekends. So it's amazing. And for them to even want me to come at my age and being that far removed from when I played there, it's just amazing to me. So that's why that's part of the surprise as to the response to this book.
Well, it's an excellent story of your life. Congratulations on its success, and we urge fans, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, be sure and get one, and maybe meet Jack at one of these signings, and he'll be happy to sign for you, and you will enjoy reading the book. They Call Me Goose by Jack Givens and his co-author, Doug Brunk. Jack, we appreciate the time today. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
You've been listening to the WUKY Sports Page with your host, Keith Elkins, an exclusive podcast from 91.3 WUKY, produced at the WUKY studios by Alan Lytle. Our theme music is Peanut Butter and Jam by Illogical Bit, available at soundcloud.com/illogicalbit. Subscribe to the Sports Page through iTunes, Google Play, or at our website, WUKY.org.